So when I go above and below, again, if I was to look at my calculator, when I plugged in my calculator, the 0.05 and I plugged it in, that's what I got. And look at that. They're not saying much here. They're not saying, again, you don't know what a limit is yet. They're just saying, find the slope of the secant to 6 decimal places. They're trying to show you that when you get from above and when you get from below, they match. Do you see they match? Not to 6, they match a lot more. So if I was going to say, well, what do you think this limit is? Well, it looks like 3.1415876, you know, but they're not asking for a limit. We're just practicing with this, nothing more. When I look at the next, number 6, they ask me for the same thing. I just want to make sure that I gave you a page number. Page 50. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, if you're using trig, make sure that you are in radian mode, otherwise it doesn't work. So, next problem, if a rock is thrown upwards on the planet Mars with a velocity of 10 meters per second, its height is given, so this is its height at any given time. Find the average velocity over the given interval. Given interval, this is like saying between 1 and 2, there's 1, there's 2. Then 1 to 1.5, there's 1.5. Then 1 to 1.1, that's 1.1. Then 1 to 1.01. And then 1 to 1.001. So do you see what's fixed in every single case? Do you see that here? If I'm looking at this, I'm really looking at the point 1. If I plug 1 in, if I take 10 times 1 minus 1.86 times 1 squared, I'll get 8.14. So in the first case, I'm running from 1 to 2 and I have to plug 2 in. Then in the second case, I'm running from 8.14 to 1.5 and whatever that is. Then I'm going from 8.414 to, in case 3, to 1.1, and in case 4, I'm going from 8.14 to 1.01, and in case 5, I'm running from 8.14 to 1.001. So I could figure out what those are. That's not bad. I could go back. Actually, I could do this. I could do 10 times answer minus 1.86 times my answer squared. And I could say, well, okay, let's go with what? Let's go with 1. There it is, 8.14. I could go with 2. And figure out what that value is. And write it down. 12.56. Or I could say, you know what? They want the slope of the secant. Slope of the secant is really going to be f of 2 minus f of 1. In this case, this is x1, y1. This is x2, y2. F of 2. So that's going to be 12.56 minus 8.14 divided by 2 minus 1. Plug this in my calculator and figure it out. When I get to the 1.5, I could say 1.5 enter. Go back up and evaluate that, and that gets me a 10.815. At 10.815. And again, do you see the slope of the secant is actually 10.815 minus 8.14 divided by 1.5 minus 1. Do you see what's fixed? And what is varying? Whatever's varying, I'm going to call that answer. So instead of doing this 5-6 times, guess what? If I go in there and I say, let's take the answer minus 8.14, because that's not going to change, divided by 2, by the answer minus 1. So there's always a 1, 8.4. And now if I go ahead and I say, you know what, let's plug in for the answer. Let's start with a 2, then a 1.5, then 1. Now let's see what we'll get. Now, if I calculate this by hand, just to make sure, if I take 12.56 minus 8.14 divided by 1, that's 1. That is 4.42. And if I go for the second piece, and I'll take 10.815 minus 8.14 divided by 1.5 minus 1, I will get a 5.35. And if I follow the rest and figure out what those are and evaluate them, I could get all of these values. Or I could do this slightly different. I could do this work only once. If I was to look at this and say, you know what, that's a lot of work, you guys. Why don't I go ahead and say the fixed value is 1. And I'm going to add an h to it. This is 1 plus h. If I do that, what is the slope of the secant? Well, if I take 1, that is 8.14. And if I take 1 plus h, that is 10 times 1 plus h minus 1.86 times 1 plus h squared. And if I say what's the slope of the secant, that's the difference quotient. That's what you've done already. That is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Those cancel out. And guess what? If I work this out, I will get a 10 plus 10h minus 1.86 minus 2 times 1.86, 3.722, right? 2h minus 1.868 squared minus 8.14 divided by h. Guess what? Those and that cancel out. If I could factor an h out of the top, I will have a 10 minus 3.72, 6.28 minus 1.86h divided by h. The h's cancel out. And I'm left with the slope of the secant to be 6.28 minus 1.86h. Now, when I want to go from 1 to 2, so if I am to repeat this, if I am to take 1 and say when you want to go to x equal 2, you went from 1 to 2, that's h equal 1. Here's my formula. My formula, the slope of the secant is 6.28 minus 1.86 times h. If I get my calculator now, 6.28 minus 1.86, answer. That's all I need. If I take 1, enter, and I go back and evaluate 4.42. Do you see what that is? When I go for 2, and I go from x, for x equal 1.5. I was at 1, I went to 1.5. What's h? 0.5? The slope of the secant would be what? Well, let me just go in there and plug in a 0.5, and that should take care of it. 0.5, 5.35. And do you see what's happening? And now, when I get to 3, 4, and 5, the work is very simple. Instead of doing this, figuring out what this is, and take all of these values if I do this just once, then I could figure out what all of these values are. Right? So here, if I went to x equal 1.01, x 1.1, 1.01, and 1.001. If I went from 1 to 1.1, isn't h 0.1, 0.01, and 0.001? Hey! H started at 1, 0.5, 0.1, 0.01, 0. Isn't that h approaching 0? And didn't we agree that if you take the limit as h approaches 0, the slope of the secant become the slope of the tangent if they level off? So here, what do I get? I'll get my calculator, 0.1, enter, and evaluate, and there it is. 6.094. And if I go ahead and plug in the 0.001, there's something I'm hoping you're going to see. And if you don't see it, I'll point it out. 6.278. 6.278 what? 14. And if I go for the 0.001, oops, 0.001, 6.27814. Okay, so it looks like it's leveling off next to 6.2814. Curiosity, you guys. I don't know if you thought that far, but let's think that far. If I let h approach 0, and here's the equation. Slope of the secant is 6.28 minus 1.86h. If I let h approaches 0. Can you guess what the answer is going to be? Put a 0 in there. Isn't that 6.28? And that's pretty much chapter 2 and velocity and the definition of velocity. So they say, what do you think the instantaneous velocity is? You could give that number. You could say that number is instantaneous velocity would be 6.28. You could give 6.27814 if you wish. And there's the homework.